On the day of my divorce from Donovan, I began my journey back to Cloudmere. In my bundle, I had a set of coarse linen clothes, a simple ribbon for my hair, and a single lotus blossom I'd plucked from the pond in the courtyard. Everything I had brought with me when I first came to the capital. The Duchess's old governess watched me, terrified I might take so much as a needle from the estate. The young master is at the academy today, and the young mistress is at her private school. If you wish to see them one last time, there's no need. For the last time, I spoke with quiet deference. Don't let a small matter like this interrupt their studies. Carrying my bundle, I walked out, one gate after another. The clouds were thick that day, and the wind was strong. With every gate I passed through, more sunlight broke through the clouds. I couldn't help but chase the light, my steps growing lighter, when one foot finally crossed the main gate of the Ducal Manor. I turned to look at the old governess. The faint smile that had long vanished from my face blossomed once more. Please inform Donovan that in this life and the next, Clara wishes to never see him again. Leaving the Ducal Manor, I stood on the street, lost for a moment. It had been 5 years since I first arrived to ask for their patronage. In all that time, I had never once stepped outside the manor gates. The life of a secluded noblewoman had nearly severed my connection to the world of ordinary people. Fortunately, it was only 5 years, not 10 or 20. I found an inn and gave the innkeeper a few silver coins. I wish to travel south. Are there any safe routes? The innkeeper took the silver and raised an eyebrow. A young lady traveling alone, yet you are not reckless. I smiled. An inn that could thrive in the capital's busiest district meant its owner had the most extensive network of connections. The innkeeper said, "The land routes are dangerous and not safe for a woman. If you want a peaceful journey, you must travel by water. The River Guild has a longboat that transports officials' wives and daughters every 3 days. If you have the coin, a ticket shouldn't be hard to come by." I had some money, but not much. If I spent it all on the ticket, I'd be destitute by the time I reached Cloudmere. After a moment's thought, I took out a flawless jade pendant from my robes. The innkeeper's eyes widened at the sight of it. "I will trade this jade for 2 things. First, a ticket to Cloudmere. Second, my safety until I board the boat." The last longboat south had departed the day before, so the next one was in 2 days. The first day was calm, but the second was filled with chaos. I peeked through a crack in the window and saw the streets swarming with officers from the Ministry of Justice. Since Donovan had taken charge of the ministry 3 years ago, the capital had been peaceful, a fact the Emperor himself had praised during the New Year's feast. Later, when the waiter brought my meal, he warned me, something big must have happened. The ministry's officers are searching the entire city. The innkeeper told me to tell you not to leave your room under any circumstances. He'll take you to the docks first thing tomorrow morning. That night, though, my door was locked and my windows were shut. The light from the officers' torches flickered through the paper. Paned window. Donovan must be dealing with a major case, I thought, but he was intelligent and calm, proper and sharp. With everything under his control, his eyes filled with a frosty clarity. The model of a nobleman. That was how he should be, how he was meant to be. The next day, at the crack of dawn, I was in the inn's carriage. The city gates opened. After the innkeeper bribed the guards, the carriage slowly rolled out of the capital. From inside, I thought I heard a loud shout from behind us. "Don't be alarmed, my lady," the innkeeper said, his voice low against the curtain. "Word came from the city to close the gates, but we're already out. We'll be at the docks shortly." When I got out of the carriage, it had started to rain. I presented my ticket, and after it was verified, I boarded the boat. The innkeeper, having received a jade worth 1,000 taels, had some conscience. My cabin, though not as spacious as those for the officials' wives, was clean and tidy. I heard 3 gongs from outside, followed by the shouts of men and women. "Dragon King, grant us safe passage." I felt the boat lurch slightly. I couldn't resist opening the wooden window to look back at the rain-swept capital. 5 years ago, I had arrived full of joy and excitement. Now, my heart was as still as water. But just as I was about to close the window, I saw a figure running frantically through the rain. In such a heavy downpour, the person must be soaked to the bone. I didn't know who they were trying to see off, but whoever it was, they were too late. I returned to Cloudmere. For 3 taels of silver, I bought a small courtyard by a lotus pond. I put up a fence, covered it with flowering vines, and planted melons and fruits. I took up my old work of gathering medicinal herbs, spending my days in the mountains and my nights studying medical texts. One day, while on the mountain as usual, I found a boy covered in blood among the rocks. His arms, legs, and half his abdomen had been mauled by a wild animal, his organs nearly visible. Yet he was still alive. Fortunately, I had gathered some hemostatic herbs that day. I applied them to his wounds, bandaged him up, and carried him home. I thought he wouldn't survive such grievous injuries, but after a feverish 7-day ordeal, he opened his eyes on the 8th morning. His eyes were dark and clear, like a pristine lotus pond, pure and untainted. "Who are you?" he asked weakly, then murmured, "Are you my mother? Then who am I?" From that day on, a child named Finn lived in my small courtyard. Having survived a beast's attack, Finn had the spirit of a little wolf cub. He was an orphan of unknown origin, and I was a newly arrived widow. It was inevitable that we would be the subject of gossip. The idle talk was nothing compared to what I had endured at the Ducal Manor. It didn't hurt me at all. Finn, however, would not yield an inch. One evening while I was bathing, I heard a noise outside, followed by a scream. When I rushed out, I saw Finn with a broom, beating a drunken man who had fallen into our yard. After that, whenever I bathed, he would sit on a small stool outside my door. "Mother, you're not alone. I can protect you." Finn would wake up before dawn every day, filling the water vat with a small bucket. Trip after trip, he would cook porridge, dry herbs in the sun, and then, when the sun was high, call me for breakfast. He fed the leftover rice and grains mixed with grass and vegetable scraps to the chickens and ducks. He reinforced the fence with thin hemp rope and climbed onto the roof with a bundle of straw to patch it. "You don't have to do all this. I'm the mother." "It's because you are my mother," Finn said, placing a peeled egg in my bowl as if it were the most natural thing in the world. A son taking care of his mother is the way it should be. I thought of my son and daughter far away in the capital. After they were born, they were taken to be raised by the old duchess. They would only come to greet me on my birthday each year, their posture perfectly disciplined, their every move distant and detached. I split the egg in half and gave him a piece. And a mother taking care of her son is also the way it should be. Seeing my smiling face, Finn lowered his head and ate his half of the egg in one bite. Soon after, I sent Finn to the local school. The village school was full of mischievous children, but Finn was different. He always sat up straight and read his books diligently. The old teacher, seeing how composed he was, often kept him after school for private lessons. One day, during a heavy snow, I worried he would have trouble getting home, so I took an umbrella to pick him up. As I reached the schoolhouse, I heard the teacher ask, "Why are you so diligent?" Finn's voice was young but steady. "I know I am not her biological son, but Mother has raised me better than any real mother could. If I do not make something of myself and ensure her a peaceful life, how can I ever repay her kindness?" I looked up at the vast expanse of white snow. It was freezing, but my heart was warm. The sun rose and set. The moon waxed and waned. Finn progressed from the village school to the county academy. Because of his excellent performance and growing reputation, his tuition was waived. Finn had a break every 10 days and could come home from the city. "Mother, I was first in the last exam again. That's 7 times in a row." The headmaster said, "A high-ranking official is coming in a few days to select students for the Imperial Academy in the capital, and I am on the list for consideration. He asked me to have you come to the city to discuss it." This was wonderful news. After his break, I went to the city with Finn. The academy's headmaster was very polite to me, repeatedly telling me how brilliant and promising Finn was. The official from the capital has been searching for students in Cloudmere for 3 years, like sifting through sand. but no one has met his standards. This official not only looks at a student's knowledge, but also at the character of their parents. For Finn's future, I hope you will handle the meeting well, Madam Clara. I nodded, and followed the headmaster to the academy's library. The headmaster spoke softly at the door. My lord, Finn's mother has arrived? The two large doors opened. I straightened my clothes and walked in slowly. The commoner Clara pays her respects to you, my lord. I was about to kneel when I heard a sharp gasp and the sound of a teacup shattering on the floor. I instinctively looked up and met a familiar gaze. A moment of daze, of disbelief, followed by an endless silence. I had said we would never meet again in this life or the next, but I never thought that day would come. He was thinner. His back was lean, his face gaunt, the frost in his brow even more pronounced. He walked towards me, step by step, his elegant jaw tight, his dark eyes tinged with crimson. I lowered my gaze. A commoner, a lord, it was proper, as it should be. Clara. Donovan's voice was filled with what seemed like both resentment and pain as he called my name. Joy, anger, sorrow. So he was capable of anger. My relationship with Donovan was like mud compared to a clear cloud. Years ago, the old Duke was seriously injured and ended up in Cloudmere, where he was saved by my father. In his gratitude, the Duke left a token, promising to repay the kindness one day. Because of his efforts to save the Duke, my father met with disaster. Before he died, he told me to go north to the capital and seek protection. I endured many hardships and nearly died several times before finally reaching the Ducal Manor. When the old Duke heard that my father had died because of him, he wept, saying he owed a great debt. I was a young woman with no one to rely on, so he decided the only way to repay my father was to promise me a good marriage and a lifetime of security. And so, I met Donovan. It was winter. I stood in the corridor and saw a slender, elegant figure walking towards me. Beneath a sky of falling snow, he wore a green robe and a fur cloak, as graceful as bamboo, as noble as a jade tree. Seeing Donovan was like glimpsing a crane in the snow. It was only natural to fall in love with such a magnificent person, but I knew we were not a match. I refused the old Duke's offer and suggested that 1,000 taels of silver and a shop in the capital would be more than enough repayment. I had studied medicine with my father since I was young and had my own ambitions. A stable life was not difficult for me to achieve. I didn't ask for much, just enough. Because of my direct request, the old Duchess and Donovan's siblings, who were already displeased with the marriage proposal, made sarcastic remarks, accusing me of leveraging their debt. At least she has some self-awareness. How could a country girl ever dream of marrying a gentleman raised in a century-old noble family? Besides, everyone in the capital knows that Donovan and the prince's precious daughter are childhood sweethearts, deeply in love. They are just waiting for the princess to come of age before he sends the betrothal gifts. They are a perfect match, a golden couple. What is a mud-legged girl who can't even tell the difference between shark fin and rice noodles doing getting involved? I never intended to get involved. The old Duke, seeing my resolve, agreed to have the silver and the shop ready for me after the Mid-Autumn Festival. On the night of the full moon, the Ducal Manor was brightly lit with lanterns. The old Duchess hosted a party, inviting many young ladies from noble families to the waterside pavilion. The guest of honor was the princess. I took a mooncake and found a quiet spot by the pond to enjoy the moon, away from the crowd. Suddenly, I was pushed into the water. I grew up in Cloudmere and knew how to swim, but the sudden push caused my leg to cramp, and I couldn't move. Just as I was about to drown, a snow-white figure jumped into the pond. I had swallowed water and was disoriented, so I clung to him instinctively. When I could see clearly again, all I saw was a chest with a wet, clinging silk shirt, and surrounding us enough lanterns to light up half the estate, with 3 layers of men and women staring. They said that because I fell in and Donovan saved me, our wet clothes clinging to our bodies meant my honor was compromised. But in Cloudmere, everyone lived by the water, digging for lotus roots and catching fish. Men and women alike, our clothes were rarely dry. What did that have to do with honor? The more I tried to explain, the uglier their expressions became. The old Duke announced publicly that Donovan and I would be married in 3 days. I wasn't the only one caught off guard. The undisguised expressions on everyone's faces are still clear in my mind. The old Duchess was furious. The young ladies were filled with hatred. The maids and servants were scornful. The princess's expression was a mixture of many things: resentment, regret, heartbreak, despair, jealousy, and hatred. Only Donovan remained expressionless, his handsome face pale and cold. Proud. Celestial Crane had accidentally stepped into a mud puddle. At the time, the mud puddle was naive, thinking it had captured the crane, never imagining that its own small world would be trampled to ruin. The library was silent. I knelt on the floor, my head bowed, completely still. Donovan seemed to be holding back. He said only one word and then stopped. After a moment, he said in a low voice, "Is there anything you want to say to me?" Without looking up, I replied respectfully. "My son, Finn, is intelligent and filial, with lofty ambitions. I hope my lord will recognize his talent and give him a chance. We divorced 3 years ago, yet Finn is already 9 years old." Donovan's voice was as cold and still as a winter pond. "Is he your stepson?" A man as composed and dispassionate as him could unleash his wrath without a change in expression. But in that soft question, I could hear a suppressed tension and danger. After a moment's thought, I answered truthfully, "He is not my stepson. Finn is my adopted son." After a long silence, Donovan let out a soft, his tone slightly gentler. "Since he is your adopted son, he has a connection to me as well. I will naturally." "My lord," I interrupted softly, slowly lifting my head to look at him, "Finn has no connection to you." I returned to Cloudmere and finally did what I had always wanted to do. I became a midwife. Because of my medical knowledge, I could not only deliver babies but also treat women's ailments. Gradually, I gained a reputation in the surrounding villages. After returning from the city, I was busy with deliveries and had no time for anything else. Childbirth is a difficult and dangerous time for women, and it happened to be an auspicious month, so there were even more women giving birth than usual. When Finn came home for his break, he stayed up for 2 nights straight, chopping, boiling, and rolling herbs into dozens of hemostatic pills. I found a moment to ask if Donovan had given him any trouble. "He didn't make things difficult. He just kept asking about you, mother," Finn said, looking at me. "Are you and he old acquaintances?" I lowered my eyes and hummed in agreement. Finn asked again, "You don't like him?" After another affirmative reply, Finn nodded. "I understand." He never asked about Donovan again. Another 10 days passed peacefully. The next time I saw Donovan, the grand carriage of a Duke of the Realm caused a stir in our small village. Finn jumped out of the carriage with a cold expression, followed by servants who placed a red and gold lacquered stool by the carriage door. Donovan and 2 children stepped out. They were a pair of exquisitely beautiful twins, a boy and a girl. Their features were not like mine at all. They had inherited all of Donovan's good looks. "Mother." Finn ran to me, shielding me with his body. I saw the red marks on his wrist from being grabbed and felt a pang of sympathy. Donovan looked at me, then at the 2 children. "Go on," he said softly. The twins were reluctant, but obediently walked towards me. And I felt a chill run through my body, trembling uncontrollably. I had walked through the gates of hell for them countless times. During childbirth, the bleeding wouldn't stop, and the fear of life draining from my body is still vivid in my memory. It wasn't that I never felt a mother's love. I once snuck into their courtyard on a snowy night and built 4 snowmen so they would see them as soon as they came out. A family of 4, with both a mother and a father. When my daughter had a high fever and no medicine worked, I cut my own flesh and let my blood without hesitation, blindly believing in the absurd notion that the blood of a close relative could cure all illnesses. I still remember when they were forcibly taken from me, I clung to the governess's sleeve, refusing to let go. "With your background, how could you possibly raise them? The old Duchess will raise them herself. You have no say in the matter. Besides, You are their mother. When they grow up, they will still be close to you. But when they grew up, they were not only distant but also cruel to me. A maid in the manor had a secret affair with a servant and became pregnant. Fearing she would be thrown out, she hid her pregnancy until she was 7 months along. When I happened upon her, the shock sent her into premature labor. A life was at stake. How could I stand by and do nothing? I delivered her baby. Just as the infant let out its first cry, the woodshed door was kicked open. The old Duchess was furious and had me punished with 10 lashes in front of everyone. My back was raw and bleeding. I lay on the ground, drenched in a cold sweat from the pain, utterly humiliated. My daughter clung to the old Duchess's waist, not even sparing me a glance. My son pointed at me with eyes full of resentment. You have disgraced yourself and lost all sense of propriety. You are not worthy of being my mother. Mother. The twins stood before me and greeted me with their heads bowed. I believe the young master and mistress have mistaken me for someone else, I said with a slight smile, my gaze humbly lowered. I am just a midwife. How could I be worthy of being your mother? I was not wrong. Even if the child was a bastard, even if the maid was a harlot, even if delivering babies was something only low-class women did, I still had done nothing wrong. Donovan's grand arrival completely shattered the peace Finn and I had found. After they left, the villagers kept asking who the god, like gentleman was, and who the perfectly sculpted children were. I thought for a moment and told them. The twins' mother nearly bled to death during childbirth. The gentleman's mother had said to save the children, not the mother, but I saved her. I didn't know why Donovan had brought the children to see me. I didn't want to guess. It didn't matter anymore. 2 women in the South Village were about to give birth and had informed me in advance. Hemostatic medicine, calming pills, salvia pills, clean cloths, scissors, silver needles. I checked everything 3 times, then reviewed their medical records, planning for any possible complications. This was what was worth my time and energy. Donovan enrolled his son and daughter in the city academy, where they became Finn's classmates. The academy, though the best in Cloudmere, was still just a county school. It wouldn't dare neglect the children of a duke. A few days later, the headmaster announced that the school was closing for renovations and sent the students home. Donovan once again escorted Finn back. This time, he didn't just stand by his carriage and look at me from afar. He walked up to me and said in a low voice, "Isabelle is sick. She wants to see you." I glanced at the girl twin. Her face was pale, and she was wearing an exquisite cloak despite the summer heat. I remained unmoved, my voice calm. If she is sick, you should return to the city to see a doctor, or better yet, go back to the capital and seek the imperial physician. It is getting late. You should leave soon. I called Finn's name and turned to go back into the courtyard. My wrist was suddenly seized. Donovan gritted his teeth. Isabelle is your flesh and blood too. His words were like a signal. Isabelle walked quickly towards me, each step the picture of a well-bred lady, her skirt swaying without revealing the tips of her shoes. She hugged my waist, pressing her hot cheek against me, and whimpered. Isabelle lay in bed, curled up in her cloak, not a single part of her touching the coarse linen bedding. It couldn't have been comfortable, but if that is what she wanted, I let her be. After checking her pulse, I told Donovan that Isabelle was suffering from acclimatization sickness. You should return to the capital soon. I am here on the Emperor's orders, Donovan said in a low voice. The selection for the Imperial Academy is not yet complete. I let out a soft "oh" and said, then you should complete the selection soon, so you can return to the capital sooner. Donovan clenched his fists and looked at me sharply. When you say complete the selection soon, you are trying to secure a future for your adopted son. When you say return to the capital sooner, you are trying to get rid of us. Am I right? I nodded once. Yes. Donovan seemed furious. Do you have no room in your heart for me, for Fey children? Not ours, I said calmly. Yours. Isabelle and Ian, father. Donovan, guardian, the old Duchess. They had nothing to do with Clara. Clara didn't want them anymore. Donovan's face paled instantly. his thin lips moving as if murmuring to himself. "We are only divorced, only divorced. You are still their mother, and they are still our children." Before I could say another word of refusal, Donovan stumbled back 3 steps and turned to leave. I watched his retreating back, a picture of devastation that was so unlike him. So the same word could have different degrees of intensity. Donovan's devastation was a slight unsteadiness in his steps. My devastation was a complete, miserable collapse. When was that? Was it shortly after we were married when I overheard him tell his close friend, "Marrying Clara was not my choice. I had intended to marry a noblewoman to secure a powerful alliance. My father used her reputation to force my hand. I didn't care about that, but if I didn't marry her, I would lose my reputation as a gentleman and be criticized. It was a matter of self-interest. I had to agree. Or was it when I was pregnant? And he said, 'The court is unstable. The eldest son and heir should not be born at this time. Get rid of it.' Or perhaps it was when I built those 4 snowmen, and he pushed them over and trampled them, scolding me coldly. 'This is a dignified household. You should conduct yourself with restraint, not engage in such childish games.' Or maybe it was after I was punished, and he looked at me with a cold, heavy gaze. 'You have debased yourself with your absurd actions. How are you fit to be the mistress of this house?' There were too many things devastation. I was like a walking corpse back then. I had no spirit to be devastated. After Donovan left, I made a pot of lotus root and bone soup. I asked Finn to look after the twins and left for the South Village with my medical kit. The delivery went relatively smoothly. The woman was in labor for 2 hours, lost half a basin of blood, tore 3 centimeters, and the baby was born. This was one of the easier births I had attended. When I returned to my courtyard, I heard arguing from inside. The first voice was Ian's, full of anger. "Do you think we want to be here? If father hadn't forced us, who would want to lower themselves to come to this filthy place?" Isabelle was also angry. "Who are you to tell us to leave? You are just a country bumpkin, a dirty..." Ian finished her sentence. "Lowlife, a commoner. She has got her hooks in my father, forcing him to make me leave my school in the capital, to come to this god-forsaken place. It is all her fault." Isabelle started to sob. "I miss grandmother. I want to go home." I touched my chest. In the past, just seeing them from a distance filled me with joy. Now, my heart was quiet, as if it had fallen into a deep sleep, or died. I made some noise, and the room fell silent. When I opened the door, the 3 children were sitting at the wooden table, each with a bowl of lotus root soup in front of them. Perhaps realizing I had overheard them, the twins' expressions were strange. "Mother." Finn stood up and took my heavy medical kit. I washed my hands and returned to find a bowl of soup waiting for me at the table. As I sat down, a piece of bone was added to my bowl, and Finn took a piece of lotus root from my soup. I smiled. "The Zhao family had a baby girl." Finn nodded. "A few weeks ago, I rode into the city with Brother Zhao. He had a feeling it would be a girl and said he wanted to buy some floral fabric to make clothes for her. He gave me a lot of that fabric as a thank you. Tomorrow, I'll have old Mrs. Liu make you a new set of clothes too," I said. "Mother, can you not?" Finn sighed. Finn and I were just making small talk, but something in our conversation seemed to trigger the twins. Feibang **. Ian slammed his hand on the table and stood up, staring at me. "I know you heard me." Before I could speak, he jutted out his chin. "I am not afraid that you heard me. You and father were never a match. Because of your low birth, we have no maternal family to rely on. In the future, when my sister marries and I enter officialdom, we will both be held back by you, always a step below everyone else." I held down Finn, who was about to lunge at him, and looked at the twins calmly. I asked softly, "If it weren't for me, where would you be?" Later that evening, Donovan came to pick up the twins. Before we could exchange a word, someone ran up to us, out of breath. "Madam Clara, old Mrs. Yun from the South Village just had a bad fall. There is blood everywhere. I was about to call for someone when Finn appeared with my medical kit in one hand and a lantern in the other. It is getting dark. I'll take you there, Mother. Donovan stepped in front of us and reached out to Finn. Give me the kit. Finn looked at him warily. Donovan looked at me, his dark eyes like an abyss. I have a carriage. It will be faster. Without hesitation, I took the kit and lantern and walked towards Donovan's carriage. Inside the carriage, I quickly reviewed Mrs. Yun's medical records. Suddenly, the space in front of me brightened. Donovan had placed a night luminescent pearl by my hand. I ignored his gesture, my entire focus on the records. Are you thirsty? Donovan asked suddenly. There is tea. Your favorite, lotus leaf dew. No, I replied flatly, not looking up. A moment later, Donovan asked again. Are you hungry? There are pastries. Your favorite, lotus seed paste crisps. I was still staring at the paper. After another moment, Donovan began. Are you Could you please be quiet? I snapped, frowning. I looked up and saw it was Donovan, then fell silent for a second. A life is at stake. Please do not disturb me. Mrs. Yuan's pregnancy had been difficult. Her morning sickness was worse than most. She was swollen all over, and she struggled to breathe. By the 7th month, she had even lost her sight for a time. She had finally made it to 9 months, just waiting for the baby to arrive. But then, this had to happen. Mrs. Yun seemed to sense something. Her withered fingers gripped my wrist tightly. Save the baby. I beg you. If I die, I die. But the baby must not be harmed. I emotionlessly removed her hand. I can't save the baby, only you can. If you live, the baby can be born. If you die, it will be 2 lives lost. Mrs. Yun gritted her teeth and pushed with all her might. My hands had been washed 3 times, but my clothes were still stained with blood, and the smell of it clung to me. When I walked out of Mrs. Yun's house, Donovan was waiting for me by the carriage, holding a lantern. The moon was bright, the stars were few, and the scent of lotus floated on the air. I used to wait for him like this, with a lantern, alone, waiting for him to return to our courtyard with me. The Ducal Manor was vast. It was a half-hour walk from our west wing to the east wing where his parents lived. Every day after court, he would go to the east wing to discuss matters with the old duke. I worried about him in the wind, the rain, the snow, and on the ice, so I would bring a cloak, an umbrella, cotton boots, and a lantern to meet him. At first, I could wait for him in a side room of the east wing. Later, he wouldn't let me into the courtyard, so I waited outside the gate. Eventually, he forbade me from waiting for him at all. There are more than enough servants in the courtyard. Mother will prepare those things for me. If you have nothing better to do, stay away from the east wing. His words still echoed in my ears. I stood a few steps away from him and bowed. Thank you for escorting me, my lord. We were once husband and wife. There is no need to be so distant, he said, looking away and stepping aside. Get in. No, I said, looking at him. I have just delivered a baby. I am unclean and cannot enter your carriage. I borrowed another lantern from Mrs. Yun's family, walked around the grand horses, and started down the country road. It was late summer, early autumn. The lotuses in the ponds on either side of the road were beginning to wilt, their leaves drooping into the water. It was a scene of decay, but I felt no regret. The lotuses of Cloudmere were endless, though they withered this autumn. Next year they would bloom again, their green leaves stretching to the horizon. Unlike the lotus pond at the Ducal Manor, built with gold bricks and jade, no matter how I tended to it, the flowers bloomed less and less. The leaves grew sparser and sparser, until there was only one last flower left in the vast pond, and I took that one with me. I heard footsteps behind me. I stopped and turned to look at Donovan. His green robes were still as elegant and otherworldly as ever, but his silver, threaded, cloud-patterned silk shoes were caked with mud from the country road. He was completely out of place. Once, that was me with him. Now, it was him with me. Donovan. I finally said his name. Donovan was taken aback. Then his eyes lit up, his voice filled with an undeniable joy. I cut him off. Why did you bring the children to see me? Donovan was silent for a moment, then said, There have been many misunderstandings between us. I hope you will come back to the capital with me, so our family can be whole again. I tilted my head slightly and looked at him, saying nothing. Donovan was usually a man of few words, but now, for some reason, he had become talkative. I was born with little emotion. It was not my intention to neglect you. In my dealings with others, I can calculate the pros and cons. But with you, I lost my calculations. I didn't know how to be good to you, or what the right thing to do was. That won't happen again, Clara. I know my own heart now. Donovan couldn't contain his feelings any longer. His thin lips pressed together tightly before he finally said, I love you. I stared at his face, lost in thought for a while. In the past, let alone such a confession, even a single glance from Donovan would have made my heart pound. But now I found that I was surprisingly calm. Clara. Donovan came closer and took my hand. I have not remarried. My heart is full of you. I looked down at our clasped hands and suddenly asked, Would you be willing to stay in Cloudmere for me? To resign from your post, or be transferred here? Donovan froze. He wasn't willing. I could see it. My expression was completely calm, almost serene. You say there have been many misunderstandings between us. I know all of them. But I also know that in your heart, the status of your family and its power are more important than me. That is why, before we were married, you wanted to marry a noble woman for an alliance. After we were married, you maintained an ambiguous relationship with the princess. Do you know when I decided not to turn back? It wasn't when the old duchess said you were going to remarry and demote me to a concubine. Nor was it when I proposed a divorce, and you agreed immediately. It was when I saw the plans for the new mansion you drew yourself at 16, in preparation for marrying the princess. After my divorce from Donovan, I had to wait 15 days for the official papers. But the very next day, Donovan was sent out of the capital on an investigation. My position at that time was very awkward. I was no longer Donovan's wife, but I wasn't completely irrelevant either. I had planned to move out of the main house, but then a large group of craftsmen arrived. You don't need to move, the old duchess's governess said with a smirk. The princess is a person of high status. How could she deign to live in a room you've slept in? Besides, when the young master was 16, he personally drew the plans for a mansion to welcome his bride. Every brick, every tile, every plant is of the highest quality. That is where the young master should live. The Ducal family was wealthy enough to fill half the lotus pond to build a new mansion from the ground up. From my courtyard, I watched the mansion rise from nothing, growing taller and taller, its painted eaves brilliant and dazzling. At that moment, I could no longer deceive myself. No matter how many times I made him lotus root soup, no matter how many lotus leaf patterns I embroidered on his collars, I was still just an accident in his life. This mansion was not for me. Donovan was not for me. You gave me 5 years as your wife and did not remarry. You have some affection for me. That is true. You tacitly allowed the rumors about you and the princess to spread, tying your family's fate to hers. That is also true. You want me to return to the capital with you, to mend our broken relationship. That is true. You are not willing to stay here for me and give up your family's legacy. That is also true. I smiled faintly and said in a low voice, You are intelligent and clear-headed. You should know that you cannot have both me and your family, and you will not choose me. Clara. Donovan's voice was hoarse. The normally cold and proper nobleman now seemed fragile and vulnerable. I didn't understand my heart before, and I wronged you. I will speak with my mother. She will not trouble you anymore. The people in the manor will respect you. We will be a loving couple. This has nothing to do with my family. Why must you? As I thought. I sighed softly. You will not choose me. Donovan stared blankly and instinctively let go of my hand. Donovan, you have your glorious life, and I have my own pursuits. They may be ordinary, but I am content. Some flowers are born in the mud and bloom in the wild. Some cranes are bathed in glory and remain untouched by dust. The flowers will cover the earth, and the crane will soar to the heavens. You and I were destined to have a connection, but no shared fate. For the rest of the way, I carried my lantern, and Donovan carried his. We walked the final stretch in silence. When I saw the wall of my courtyard, my sleeve was suddenly pulled. Donovan's fingers were trembling slightly. He murmured in a low voice, "You are in my heart. I was just too late." "Not too late," I said, pulling my sleeve back. "Wrong. If it hadn't been for that night of the Mid-Autumn Festival, I would still be me, and he would still be him. We would each be in our rightful places, living our own separate peaceful lives." Finn and the twins did not clash again, but the twins looked at Finn with eyes red with hatred. Before getting into his carriage, Donovan looked at me deeply. "I will come to see you again." "There is no need," I said. "I don't want to see you again, and I certainly don't want to see them." The twins immediately looked at me with the same hatred they had for Finn. Donovan was silent for a moment, then got into the carriage with the two children. The ornate carriage swayed as it drove away. Finn tugged at my hand and said in a low voice, "Mother, I was wrong." "What?" I looked down at him. Finn pressed his soft lips together tightly, then said quietly after a moment, "They kept speaking ill of you. I couldn't stand it. So I put a handful of andrographis in their lotus root soup. Andrographis is incredibly bitter. One sip, and you can't speak for half a day." Finn looked remorseful. "They are your children, Mother. I shouldn't have." "Mother only has one child, doesn't she?" I smiled at him. After smiling, I couldn't help but sigh. "But your chances of going to the Imperial Academy are probably gone." "I don't want to go to the Imperial Academy." Finn looked up at me, his eyes clear. "I have decided to enroll in the Provincial Academy. With the headmaster's recommendation, the Cloudmere Academy will send someone soon." The Cloudmere Academy, as good as it was, could not compare to the Imperial Academy in the capital. Finn had the ability to go. "Between my mother's love and a shortcut to success," Finn said, his eyes curving into a smile, "I will always choose my mother." The next year, when he came home for a visit, he brought a lotus flower from outside the gate. "Someone must have picked it from the pond for fun, and just tossed it aside," Finn said, handing the flower to me. The flower was just about to bloom. I found a porcelain vase and put it in water. That lotus flower bloomed all the way through the Mid-Autumn Festival. For years after that, a flower would appear every year, but I never saw the person who picked it and left it there. Phaeapologue, Donovan Faye Donovan was the eldest son of the Ducal family, exceptionally handsome, and coldly self-possessed. He never made a misstep in his dealings, and his plans were always long-term. How to gain fame, how to establish his authority, and even how to use marriage to consolidate his power. Donovan had a plan for everything. At 14, he chose to align himself with the prince's faction. At 15, as planned, he met the princess and won her heart. At 16, he personally drew the plans for their marital home. According to his plan, the princess would one day see these drawings and be utterly devoted to him. However, he had not anticipated that a young woman named Clara would appear at his door. She carried a tattered bundle, but in her arms was a fresh lotus blossom. She said shyly that she had no money for travel and didn't want to arrive empty-handed, so she had picked a flower from a pond outside the city as a small token. His father promised her marriage. He was against it from the bottom of his heart, but he showed no sign of it. He was the model of a nobleman. Filial piety came first. He could see that Clara had fallen for him at first sight. This only irritated him more. Marrying a commoner instead of a princess would add many detours to his path to power. But to his surprise, Clara refused. Clara clearly adored him, yet she wanted money and a shop instead. That was unexpected. Not only that, but after refusing the marriage, Clara began to avoid him. A man of Donovan's looks and status had seen every trick a young woman could play. playing hard to get, that was all. Later, Donovan realized that wasn't it. Clara was genuinely avoiding him. Clara came from the countryside and often did embarrassing things. She would roll up her trousers and wade into the lotus pond to dig for roots, her eyes filled with a smile as bright as the stars. It was absurd. Even at night, a young lady should not expose her legs. Those pale, slender legs. What if someone saw? At the very least, he had seen them during a sleepless night. What annoyed him even more was that she cooked the lotus roots into a soup and sent a bowl to every courtyard except his. Donovan wasn't angry. Donovan just felt stifled. On the night of the Mid-Autumn Festival, Donovan was supposed to be with the princess, but on a whim, he followed Clara instead. Clara was by the pond, eating a mooncake and smiling to herself. She was leaving the next day, yet she could still smile. Donovan nearly crushed the ebony fan in his hand. Just then, he saw the princess's maidservant stealthily approaching Clara. Donovan saw her intentions at a glance. He could have called out, thrown his fan as a warning, or simply ignored it. But in that split second, he made the most rebellious choice of his life. After marrying Clara, Donovan didn't know how to act around her. She wasn't part of his plan, so he could only treat her with his usual cool detachment. His close friend asked him how married life was. He would never tell the truth about that night, so he feigned indifference and said things he didn't mean. When Clara became pregnant, he was ecstatic. They would truly have a child of their own. But then he realized something was wrong. The princess was resentful and wanted to take Clara's place. Fearing the dangers of childbirth, she conspired with his mother to give Clara a certain medicine. The medicine could cause a woman to have multiple births. If Clara died in childbirth, they could save the children, not the mother, and get what they wanted. This involved the princess and his own mother. He couldn't reveal the truth about either of them. So, he found an excuse and told Clara to terminate the pregnancy. But Clara was strong-willed, and his mother also disagreed. The princess interfered and had him sent away from the capital. In the end, Clara risked her life to give birth to twins, but it damaged her health. She needed to rest and recover carefully, or she would suffer from chronic illness. So he agreed to let his mother raise the children, so Clara could rest. But Clara didn't know any of this. In the dead of winter, she snuck into the children's courtyard to build those ridiculous snowmen. In the frost and snow, was she trying to kill herself? He was so angry he pushed over the snowmen and warned her never to be so reckless again. Clara's status was already precarious. If she wasn't careful, the princess and his mother would find fault with her, and her situation would become even more difficult. But she had to go and deliver the bastard child of a harlot, giving people an excuse to talk. How would that end? He had intended for his mother to teach her a small lesson, so she would be more careful in the future. He never expected his mother to have her publicly whipped without mercy. When he returned, her face was pale. The bloody welts on her back felt like a knife twisting in his own heart. But when he thought about how her actions could give people leverage to threaten their marriage, the lecture spilled from his lips. Donovan didn't want Clara to leave him, but she drifted further and further away. He couldn't pinpoint when their relationship had changed, but the adoration in Clara's eyes was gone. He noticed Clara growing closer to a young physician in the manor. One day, in Clara's dressing table, he found dozens of letters. When he opened them, he found they were filled with obscene diagrams of a woman's private parts. All the letters were from that physician. He had given up a long-planned political alliance for Clara, and this was how she repaid him. Donovan was panicked, annoyed, angry, and hurt. So when Clara proposed a divorce, he said without thinking, "Fine,